At the age of 25, I received a phone call that changed my life. I just answered the phone from a random German number, and the person said, Thomas, I need you to hire 130 engineers to unlock 50 million in revenue. It was Lawrence, the CEO of Tier, after a Series D funding, and after 200 million in funding, they had a growth goal to achieve, and therefore they needed to grow. Already did 30 million rides annually, roughly 200 million in revenue, and the business model looked a bit like this. This is fictional data. You can see a seasonal spike during summer because Tier is a scooter business, a ride-sharing business, and they wanted to prepare with 130 engineers to build new products on the payment side, on the ride side, that should unlock 50 million in additional revenue. And this was all in January. And I got the phone call in December. That was my reaction. In December, I already was thinking about, okay, what should I buy my parents for Christmas? But then I had way more different problems to solve. And this is how I felt. And now we can go through all my thoughts and all the things that I did in terms of processing when I was faced with this situation, which seemed like an impossible task, and it was. That not enough time, not enough candidates, not the right offer that matches the market needs, not enough capacity, hiring managers were not aligned, Christmas was there or coming, managers not available to interview, and the executive team was not educated on the capabilities. We had untrained hiring managers, no recruitment data to rely on, notice periods, ramp-up time, onboarding capacity. And I thought, okay, I cannot solve any problem for you, but at least I can try. And this is what I did. So, there are some methodologies that help me to find a solution. Copied from McKinsey, from whom else, right? So let's talk about frameworks. First thing I did was make it easy. Anybody in the audience knows what easy means? Okay, next. Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And it's actually nothing more than a very simple two-step framework when you tackle a problem, to understand the problem by making a list of all attributes that you can find associated with this problem, and then structuring it mutually exclusive. What you can see here. So here, I started always high level to understand, okay, what's actually fundamental strategic piece during that time to describe the problem. It was achieve the growth goal, and it had three main pillars: revenue, time, and cash out bank to fund it. And the revenue pillar was still broken down into number of rides and the euro per ride. And 80% of the impact to achieve this growth goal, or to leverage against the growth goal, was on the euro per ride aspect. So I dig deeper. And another framework, I built out a logic tree, like you can see here, made it easy, and started by building a hypothesis. And I did not build it, I just used what was already there and tried to play with it. And the hypothesis was, by achieving the product development goal, we can increase the euro per ride, which was aligned with the overall strategic goal. And then you just break it down. Okay, 4 attributes: hiring, onboarding, delivery, and monetization, to achieve the product development goal that is positively impacting the euro per ride. Then I did not focus on all the other aspects like onboarding, delivery, and monetization, because I was there for hiring, and this is where I focused to double down. Okay, next one, I said, okay, there are candidates, recruiters, hiring managers, and setup. I cannot focus on everything, so let's try to find again the 20% with 80% impact. And in that sense, after some conversations with the leadership, with the executive team, by just understanding the situation, we focused on, okay, let's focus around time, quality, and quantity, so to get a few of the right candidates fast. So we have a solution. Not yet. Next one, yeah. But at least there was a certain confidence to say, okay, let's do it. Next slide. Then we started prioritization. How? By getting the CPTO perspective. Why? Because this was the most important stakeholder for achieving that goal. After the phone call of the CEO, get it done. So you could start and say, what should I do? I think it's not a good strategy. Even if I was not an engineering leader and product leader before, I think it's important to be able to operate outside of your circle of competency, and there is another framework for it. It's from a book called The Great Mental Model, 3 volumes. I would recommend you to read all of them because it really helps you in life. And it just is a principle and concept that helps you understand what you know, what you don't know, and what you don't know, what you don't know. Next slide. So, operating outside my circle of competency was crucial to also operate really fast and get things done. And this is a 4-step process I used, which I just shared. So, first of all, know when you're outside of your circle of competency. Second, read and learn about the basics of the circle of competency you want to get into. And in that case, it was structuring product development teams that deliver ASAP. Third, talk to someone whose circle of competency in the area is strong. In that case, it was CTO, CPO, and also other people I knew from maybe previous searches or from my network, which was just, hey, I have a problem to solve, can I ask you some questions? Prepare the question and ask them. This is why it's important to read up front. Probe the limits of their circle of competency. Don't believe everything what they just say, because you don't know what they don't know, but you should think about it. And then ask yourself how the situation might influence the information that was provided. And then, fourth again, use broad understanding of mental models to understand what's next. And we continue with, next slide, another logic tree. To say, okay, we now have a sub-hypothesis of our hypothesis that gets us closer to our goal, or to at least a plan. And it was by staffing 1/3 of the team in Q1, we have a chance to launch payments and rights, that was the product teams, that allow us to unlock the 50 million in revenues. Because CEOs are high level, they discuss with the board, they tell a storyline, and they say, yes, we can make it happen. But of course, they're not in the details, but my job was to understand what are the limitations and what is possible and how can we best get to what we want to achieve. And then we said, okay, let's structure the product development team into revenue critical and non-revenue critical roles. We did forget about the non-critical revenue roles. Why? Because it just didn't matter. And then we focused on the revenue critical roles and structured it in the payments and right teams. And then it was 4 sub-teams, localization what was needed to get right, infrastructure, the group rights, and an onboarding. Next. Yes, and then we focused just on revenue critical roles. Next. And then we had our plan. As you can see here, the number of hires over time we need to do. And in purple, you see the revenue critical team and then a non-revenue critical team. And in Q1, it was clear for everybody, we just focus on that. Next slide. And these engineers, next slide, should then unlock this revenue. Next slide. So now we are talking, because now we have a plan that is deliverable. Next one. So let's go into the recruitment perspective of this, because this was all management stuff. Next one. First of all, new starters are not hires. I think that's really important to understand, and what you can see here is, on purple, the team size overall, cumulative, and red one, the new hires. And yes, there is also still a notice period that is between a start date and hiring. Next one. So it's an important formula to be aware of. Next one. By considering that, and remember this was December, we needed to make a plan to say, okay, how can we get people started in Q1? So one limitation again was time, quality, and quantity. Quantity was sorted because we limited to 1/3 of the original plan. Quality we sorted later, and now here we sort the time attribute. And structured the hiring plan. I always would recommend using 2 attributes. One is the timeline, and second, on the other axis, you can do whatever you want, what is relevant. First, we said, okay, we need to achieve a certain number of hires by month with a certain notice period. And here you can see on this table the number of hires we needed to do with notice periods, or software engineers. Here you could then see the number of hires we would make. This is a different number than the number of starters we will have, which is a different number again of what's the overall team size. But I'm always a fan of being transparent on all perspectives to have an aligned plan. Because the worst thing that can happen is unalignment in times of criticalness. And then you had a plan, and then you had a delta to see, are you at plan, behind plan, above plan? Next one. And this was then our hiring goal. So suddenly, that was then from the hiring goal, the plan of new starters with the people we hired in Q1. Next one. Now, we forecasted what is needed in order to get the hires done. And I would always recommend to start with a funnel, so it's important that you have a structure in your recruitment team. You start with assumptions based on your existing data. If you don't have existing data you can rely on, use benchmark data, ideally both. Then map the stages, what activities are needed in each stage to make one hire. Calculate conversion rates and the time and stage, so you have an idea of how long it takes and what is necessary to do. Next one. Then we had KPIs we went in terms of assumptions. A sourcer needed to interview and source 300 candidates a week. A recruiter needed to generate or do 15 interviews a week. A hiring manager 5 and software engineers 3 on a later stage in the process. Next one. And then again, we had a plan. We now just multiplied the KPIs needed with the initial funnel in order to make one hire, and suddenly we have a plan of what is needed to achieve the goal on a very granular basis. And then you can see in January we needed to source 2,300 candidates, in February 3,000, and in April just 1,900. The TA screens we need to do, the hiring manager screens, functional screens, reference checks, and it's good because you put that out into the quarterly OKRs, and then you can make a traffic light system, green, amber, red. Are you on plan, behind or not? Are you at risk? And be open about it, proactively communicate it. If that is not accurate anymore because circumstances change, update the plan. A plan is never about the plan, it's always about the planning, and no plan survives first contact with the enemy, that's for sure. So we had the capacity what we needed, right, in order to achieve the goal. So we needed around 2 to 3 sources, especially in the beginning, 5 to 7 recruiters, 7 to 11 hiring managers, and around 10 engineers in order to just get the interviewing or activity goals done. It was achievable. Next slide. But when I just look at the table, there were 3 areas I immediately spotted. The hiring manager screen takes too long, functional screens as well, and the offer acceptance rate is bad. So what do we do about it? We better are proactive about it. This is why it's always helpful to have benchmark data that you can convince the business to change something, and this is what we did. So we broke down the hiring bottlenecks again in a MECE framework. Then it's easily understandable and clear for everyone. Our hiring bottlenecks are 3: the offer acceptance rate, time to hire, and the notice periods. On the offer acceptance rate, we needed to increase the time to decide and also work on the package. This is what data showed us. Then the time to hire was the hiring manager availability and SLAs, what we need to do, what we need to tackle in order to solve the problem. And on the notice periods, we need to focus maybe on certain regions, sign-on bonuses, and fast-track candidates. Next slide. And then we came up with SLAs and said, okay, we need to improve the time to hire before even starting from 49 days to 26, and this is how we do it. We just map the hiring process, agree on how much time, on average, a candidate can stay in that stage in order to move forward, and that was what the current was. Nobody can say no. The goal is there, the CEO said it, the CPTO said it, they say it to the hiring manager, you map it, and that's a plan, and that's achievable, and then you just do it. Next one. Hand on the money, right? So, in my career, I found a lot of people are not maybe able to cope with pressure under constraints. But I see this differently. I think it's an asset. Because if they pressure you to say, you need to hire 130 people, then I can make 50 million more revenue. You can leverage that back and say, in order to achieve 50 million revenue for you, I need 2.5 million to adjust the engineering salary bands for the new hires and the existing team to get it done with the right quality of candidates, and this is proof. This is the proof I have. And you can act like Tom Cruise really cool and say, I need that. Next one. And of course we also had that, right? This takes some time, it's important, I think, that you have a good ATS like Ashby, where you can really leverage data, where you track salary expectations, withdraw reasons, rejection reasons, in order to get reports live on a timeline where it's needed. And then the data can show you, this is actually basically just a calculation of for how many % of the candidates we could not hire because of the package, we lose the offer, and how much money to increase or match the bands would we need in total to fill the gap of hires, and also of course equity, think about the existing team. Next one. Another step was fast lane. We built a fast lane for software engineering, or a hiring day, however you want to call it. So if a candidate fits the major requirement, this is important why you're aligned from the beginning. After the TA screen, the recruiter should be able, without any question, or the coordination operations team, book the candidate for the entire hiring process into one day, and the engineers and the hiring managers have to prioritize it. This is how you also are able to hire engineers in a week. It's possible. You just need to get the alignment up front. Next one. So that was before the end of the quarter. And after the end of the quarter, it was a really tough time. People really struggled. We made it happen. We had some failures, some winnings, but important, we had always a plan. We never said it was not possible. We always approached an impossible task by breaking it down by frameworks and methodologies and principles and saying, this is what we need in order to get closer. And suddenly, the reputation of the recruitment team was, wow, they are rocking it. Next slide. And within 1 month, we doubled the number of tech hires without adding extra recruitment capacity. Next slide. I call this scientific recruitment, and it's again broken down into 4 pillars: hypothesis-driven, framework-based, accurate, and simple. And framework-based is needed for verifiability, objectivity, and validity in everything what you do. So don't reinvent the wheel, just use principles, methodologies, and frameworks from outside recruiting, like consulting, general thinking, finance, whatever it is needed in order to achieve recruitment goals. Because sometimes you need to influence outside of recruitment to achieve recruitment goals. And executive teams or people or managers, they just don't know. It's your responsibility to think for them. I think that's really important in terms of mindset perspective, right? Next slide. Why is this call so life-changing now? Because this is how it started, right? Because I operated like this, I was promoted to a director without even applying for it. There were, I think, 500 candidates in the process for this role. The CEO called me and said, I don't want anybody else than Thomas, because I saw how he communicates, how he works, and that he understands what he's doing, even if he did not do something like this before. People-wise, my company was started on all these principles 3 years ago, and bootstrap profitable from day one in a really tough market, which is growing. Leading companies trust us and our approach, and I can recommend you some books. Documentation on Notion, on principles, whatever you want. And templates. Just scan this QR code, I send it to you. Questions? We are done.
Thank you, Thomas. For all of you, you can ask questions old-fashioned way. Just raise your hand, I will pass the mic, or using our application dashboard if you are shy. So let's go.
Thank you. That was very inspiring. I have 2 questions. I was very curious about the planning with the first hiring the crucial revenue roles and the non-revenue crucial roles, and these discussions with my stakeholders on that. Can you give me an example of maybe a non-revenue crucial role?
Yes. So I think accounting, right? Accounting or people operations. So they are not directly contributing to revenue. But if the payroll or the financing, the closing of statements is not done on time, the company is maybe paying a fine or is not able to operate. Imagine people are not paid accurately or on time. That's business critical. Then call it business critical or infrastructure critical. I think what is important, zoom out and think of the overall impact and the overall storyline and priority the business has, and then frame it back to what you want to achieve, pitch it, and of course it needs to make sense and it really needs to add value, but then you get things approved and done.
And the second one is about the 2.5 million that you were saying, show me the money. Was this on top of the budgeted salaries that you had for the developers?
Yes, definitely. So it was two pillars. One pillar was the existing team, because I think it was already more than 200 engineers. And another piece was the new hires, like 130 or so. And of course I did not use the real life data, I used fictional data, but the whole mechanics and the storyline were similar. Yeah? And I saw this in many places. For instance, we also worked with a publicly traded company on sales. And they did not get 50 sales hires done, so they hired us. What we did was interviewing 100 salespeople in a month, broke down the salary expectations by region, by sales experience, by all the attributes they needed into a report and said, hey, if you take this money, you can hire these more people, but it's just an additional top. Of course, you can also hire and just introduce people, but in order to get to that number, I think you just need to gather data. You need to understand how many roles would be affected, and then just multiply the gap with the number of people that would be impacted, and then raise money internally. It's like fundraising. And then just say the 2 million I need will unlock, in that case I think 25x more. It pays off. Would you invest into something that gives you a 25x ROE? I would.
Okay, any more questions? First time, second time, third time? Sold. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Come and shout.